Well, welcome, Ariel, today. I am really honored to be able to have a conversation with you. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's my joy and pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. This topic, I was really excited when I heard from one of your managers for conversations and connections reach out because sleep is something I've struggled with for such a long time. And I tried a lot of the band-aid approaches with different sleep medications and things like that, and none of it really helped. And I remember one of the first things I learned was that a lot of the sleep medications don't actually put you into sleep. They just knock you out unconscious. And so your body's not receiving all the beautiful benefits of sleep that it would otherwise. And so I started my own journey of diving into how I could reimagine sleep and what it would affect in the rest of my life and my health. And so when I learned about Muse and what you're doing in regards to meditation and brain and sleep, I thought, okay, I have to get you on. I have to hear more about this and what it is you do. So could you start by letting our listeners and viewers know how you got into this world of meditation and specifically using tech to help enhance sleep and brain health?
Sure. So I was trained as a neuroscientist and began working in a research lab with Dr. Steve Mann. He's one of the guys who really invented the wearable computer. And he had an early brain-computer interface system. So it was a single EEG electrode that you would put on your head that was able to track brain activity and brain state. And so from there, we sort of said, hey, we can take this out of the lab and there's going to be a ton of uses. And we first actually started to help people interact with technology with their brain, and then realized that that's not the most powerful use here. The most powerful use is helping people understand their own mind. And we could create a easy to use, this is as the wearables were starting to be a thing. You had the Fitbit, the Jawbone Up, you had, wearables that people were wearing to track your heart rate, your movement, your steps. Well, we could track your brain. And we could teach you important things like what to do during meditation, whether you were meditating or not. And we could track your brain during sleep and create an experience that could really help you fall asleep far more effectively.
So what exactly is going on in our brains when we sleep? And why might someone be having trouble falling asleep? Like, what's going on in the brain if that's something they're experiencing?
There are so many things going on in the brain during sleep. So we start when we're awake, we're in wakeful consciousness, we are alert, we're having kind of a standard pattern of brainwave activity. As we begin to fall asleep, when we first close our eyes, you see an increase in alpha activity. And then as we move into stage 1 and 2 sleep, you see particular characteristics in the brain. Sleep spindles, so these are little high frequency bursts that happen. K complexes, these are big bursts of activity that actually serve to shut out the noise around you. It sort of like quiets your consciousness so that you're more able to fall asleep. And over time, your conscious mind lets go, and then you slip even deeper into delta waves. And when we start to see delta wave activity, that's when sleep has happened. And then when you get into REM sleep, you see a different pattern of brainwave activity, movement of the eyes, and your body is actually stopped. So you can't physically move, even though it's much closer to a wake-like state. And then throughout sleep, you see a shift between these stages. So you'll go, you might have little peaks of wakefulness, and then you go through stage 1, 2, deep sleep and REM sleep. And in the first half of your night, you have most of your deep sleep. So the first 4 hours, ideally, is deep sleep. And then the second half of your night, you have most of your REM sleep. So the next 4 hours continue to go through cycles with more and more REM and very little deep sleep. So both phases of sleep are important. And so when you're skipping out on sleep, you might be either not getting enough deep sleep or not getting enough REM sleep, depending on when in your cycle you're missing sleep at the beginning or at the end.
And I know and have done a lot of study around circadian rhythm, and there's been a lot of conversation about that. And from what you found and from a neuroscientist perspective, is there a certain time or a window in the night where we're more likely, if we're in bed by a certain time and waking up at a certain time, to get both the beginning and deep stages of sleep? What is your if kind of recommendation on that? Do you feel like there is a specific time, or it just doesn't necessarily matter?
So timing is different for each person, but what you overall want to be doing is timing yourself with the rhythms of the world, the light and dark. So kind of backing up for a second, what is circadian rhythm? Well, circadian rhythm is the 24-hour cycle that your body and mind goes through, and it's actually set by light. So when you wake up in the morning and light hits your eyes, it turns off a hormone called melatonin, which some of us take to try to improve sleep. And throughout the day, when it's bright out, your melatonin levels are low. And then in the evening, as it starts to become dark, your melatonin levels rise again. And melatonin is kind of like your sleepiness signal. So as the melatonin levels rise again, you become sleepier and sleepier. And then it's fully dark, your melatonin levels are high, you're hopefully asleep. They remain high throughout the night when it's dark. And then as soon as light hits your eyes again, even your closed eyes through your lids, your melatonin levels start to drop, bringing you into a wakefulness. So what most of us have happening in our lives is we are completely out of sync with our own circadian rhythms versus the light that we're receiving. So, we might be sitting in our bed at 9 p.m. with a bright screen in our face, which is keeping us from sleeping because it's being signaled that, hey, it's bright out, it's bright, it's bright. But actually, this is the time when you want your melatonin levels to be increasing and you want to be becoming sleepy and you really want it to be dark. So you can go to sleep at whatever time you want, but the key is to start dimming the lights around you 30 to 60 minutes before you sleep so that your brain is signaled, oh, it's getting dimmer and dimmer and dimmer. Let's start our melatonin production, and then have it be pitch dark when you're sleeping and then bright right when you want to be waking back up again. Mm-hmm. So you want to construct your environment to really support your melatonin rise and fall to support your sleep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really helpful explanation, I think, for people to get an idea of what that looks like. And I do think it varies from person to person when they naturally are going to. I'm sure you've heard of Dr. Michael Brune's work with chronotypes as well, which I find really interesting. But it is so important that when you are ready to go to bed, you are signaling your body through dark and then in the morning through light exposure right away. As far as your own experience, did you ever struggle with sleep? Was sleep ever something you personally found challenging?
So I'm somebody who falls asleep easily at the beginning, probably biological, but I would wake up in the middle of the night and then not be able to fall back asleep. And that was my struggle. And, we just talked about, I now have a 10-week-old. And so you're constantly woken up in the night and then falling back asleep becomes key. And for me, the real key in falling back to sleep was managing anxiety and managing my thoughts. So, you wake up in the middle of the night and then you immediately go into, oh no, I'm awake. Uh-oh, I won't be able to sleep. And so the key for me was to be able to say, I'm awake. That's okay. I'm just going to let go of these thoughts that I'm having. I'm just going to let my mind wander. I'm going to meditate a little bit. And then it allowed me to fall back into sleep without engaging my thoughts and my discursive mind, which would then engage the anxiety, which would then totally keep me from sleeping. And so, in our lab, we work a lot on how to help you fall asleep and fall back to sleep. So we've created interventions that actually use meditation and sound to just help you let your mind go and fall back to sleep easily.
Mm-hmm. That was my next question. Is there a specific type of meditation that's more effective than maybe another type when you are waking up in the middle of the night? And I find that too, that had always been my problem generally. And it's the thoughts. That's usually what keeps you laying there because you're worried about how long you've already been awake in the middle of the night and how tired you're going to be the next day and all of that. So, but I know some forms of meditation actually like boost your alertness too. And so what kind of meditation should we be employing in the middle of the night to help us fall back to sleep?
Sure. So there's a few different skills that you learn in meditation that are very useful. So a basic focused attention practice teaches you to focus your attention on your breath and move your mind away from your wandering thoughts. So that's a really important skill to learn. So in a focused attention meditation, you might be having a thought, but you let it go and you just bring your attention back to your breath. And so you disengage your thoughts. This at the beginning really helps you fall asleep. When you become a more expert meditator at focused attention, it makes you more alert. So the skill of letting go of your mind is key to helping you fall asleep. That's an important part of focused attention meditation. But you don't want to engage the alertness. So as a beginner, focused attention meditation helps you sleep beautifully. As an expert in meditation, you want to use that aspect of focused attention that you've learned, but you don't want to engage the alertness. So another great tool to help you fall asleep, a meditation technique, is to count your breaths and slow your breath. So when we're anxious, we tend to breathe quite quickly. When we're relaxed, we breathe more slowly. So what you want to do is have a slow inhale and then an even slower exhale. So when you breathe in, your heart rate increases. When you breathe out, your heart rate decreases. And so if you can do a breath that's like 4 breaths in, 8 breaths out, you're going to be spending more time in a decreasing heart rate, which further relaxes your body and again cues you into sleep, because this lowering heart rate becomes another cue for your body to move into sleep.
Which is probably why meditation also at the top of the night can help you fall asleep as well, because it is helping to slow your breathing rate down and cueing that, okay, we're relaxed, it's safe to sleep now, sort of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's really beautiful. Is there a period of time from just like a brain's perspective that it takes for this to become an automatic thing? When you wake up in the middle of the night, if you practice it, can someone expect one time to see results, or it's going to be something they have to work at for a period of time?
Of course, it is something that you have to work at. Pretty soon you can start to feel a bit of a difference. You can start to feel like, oh, I don't have to be carried away by these thoughts. Oh, as soon as you breathe deeply, your body does relax. But the more you do it, the more you practice it, the better it becomes and the faster it happens for you. So ideally, you want to have a meditation practice of 5 to 10 minutes per day. And after, just a week or a couple of weeks, you'll be able to really see the impact that it has on your sleep. So in a study that we did with Muse using Muse meditation and go to sleep tools, meditation tools, within 6 weeks, people saw a 20% improvement in sleep quality, including faster times to sleep, less wake up in the night, faster to fall back asleep, etc.
Yeah, I think especially if you're incorporating throughout the day other mindfulness practices and meditation, like I know you have, is it a separate device for sleep than you use that Muse has for regular daily meditation during the day?
Yeah, so we have 2 devices. One is Muse 2, and the Muse 2 is meditation only, meant to be used during the day or just before bed as a meditation only. And then we have a new device, Muse S, which is soft and super cozy, and you can wear it while you're falling asleep. So that comes with more advanced sleep tools, sleep tracking throughout the night, basically as effectively as a sleep lab, and tools that help you fall asleep and fall back to sleep, like our digital sleeping pill.
So on that note, I love that it shows you it gives you actual feedback about what's happening while you sleep. What are people looking for? Like, what are the indicators that you've gotten adequate rest? Because I know people talk about also, there's a lot of debate in the biohacker world as far as how much sleep you need. Some people are like 6.5 hours should be fine if the quality is high. Others, 8 to 10. So what are we actually looking for that indicates we're getting adequate sleep to restore and rest our brain and our bodies?
Sure. So we're looking for sufficient deep sleep. So ideally, that's half of your night in deep sleep. We're looking for, actually, let me put a finer note on that. So that's half of your night that you're doing your deep sleep cycles. Within that, about half of that will be deep sleep. So about 25% of your night in actually deep sleep. And it's not just about the amount of time that you spend in deep sleep, but it's also the depth of your deep sleep. So with Muse, because we're tracking your brain waves, you can see not just how long you were in deep sleep, but actually how much deep sleep you had, how deep that deep sleep was. And we have something called deep sleep points that show you your delta wave activity and the amplitude of it, the depth of it. Then you want to be looking at how many sleep cycles you get throughout the night. So those people that are like, yeah, I can sleep 6.5 hours, that's because they've gotten a sufficient number of sleep cycles within their 6.5 hours. So a sleep cycle is typically around 90 minutes long. Some people's, and that's going from wakefulness to sleep to deep sleep, back to wakefulness. And if you,
sorry about that.
yeah, no problem. Totally understand. Yep. So in a sleep cycle, you're going from wakefulness into stage 1, stage 2, deep sleep, REM sleep, stage 1, stage 2, deep sleep, REM sleep, et cetera, et cetera. So for some people, those sleep cycles are 90 minutes. For some people, they're 60 minutes. And so you can get 5 to 6 sleep cycles in 6 hours. But for somebody else to get 5 to 6 sleep cycles, that's going to take you 8.5 hours. So those people who say, oh, yeah, I can only sleep 6.5 hours and I'm fine. Well, chances are that's not true. Chances are you feel like you're fine, but you actually haven't had sufficient amounts of deep sleep. You may not have had sufficient depth of deep sleep, and you probably haven't had at least 5 sleep cycles that night. So you might feel like it's fine, but your data is going to tell you otherwise. But for a small percentage of the population, if you're checking all your marks on what your brain is supposed to be doing during sleep, maybe you really are just a 6.5 hour sleeper. But I don't want anybody to think hearing this, oh yeah, that's me, because really it's a small percentage of the population. And most of us are chronically underslept because we feel like we can function, but in reality, we're not getting the proper depth of sleep that we need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're aiming, just to recap on that, we're aiming for 5 sleep cycles, regardless if you have it's 60 minutes for you or 90 minutes for you a night. Okay. And what determines whether you're a 60 or 90 minute person?
Biological. So there's 2 things. One, it's biological, and 2, age. So as we age, our sleep changes. You know, we all know that a newborn just born is going to sleep 14 hours a night or 16 hours, 17 hours a day. They're going to have a lot of sleep. And as we age, that amount of sleep decreases. So if you're in your 20s or 30s, you're probably wanting to get 8 hours of sleep. If you're now in your 50s, 60s, 70s, you may only be able to get 6.5 hours of sleep per night because that's now just your body's rhythms. It doesn't necessarily mean it's enough sleep, which is why older adults tend to nap during the day, because you're just not able to get a sufficient amount of sleep during the night.
Which I'm curious on what your thoughts are on napping, because I've heard mixed things on whether or not you can actually make up your sleep in naps, or if that's going to throw off your circadian rhythm. Is it worth doing? Do you feel like it is, if you've had a rough night's sleep, going to be helpful, or you should wait to the next night and try again?
Okay, so the thing about napping is not all naps are the same.
Yeah.
So you want to take a nap prior to 2 o'clock, because any nap after 2 o'clock has the opportunity to damage your sleep that night. So there's this thing called sleep pressure that builds up in your brain. So throughout the day, there's a little molecule called adenosine that builds up in your brain more and more and more and more and more, and increases your sleep pressure. And by nighttime, so much adenosine is built up that you just cannot help but fall asleep. And then throughout the night, it starts to decrease in your brain. And by morning, there's very little adenosine. You feel much more alert, and then you're ready to go. So you actually have these 2 systems, melatonin that we talked about earlier, which is circadian rhythms, and adenosine, which creates sleep pressure. Now, if you're going to take a nap close to bedtime, what actually happens is you end up relieving some of that sleep pressure. So it's like, oh my God, I got to sleep. And then you go to bed, and then some of the adenosine unbinds because you're asleep. And then you wake up, you're ready to go to bed again at 9 or 10 or whatever your bedtime is. And you don't have the same amount of sleep pressure to knock you back out. So you're stealing some of your nighttime sleep. So to make sure you don't impact your sleep pressure, you want to nap before 2 p.m. and you want your naps to be short, like around 25 minutes. That's not enough to actually damage your sleep the next night if it's earlier in the day. That said, napping is awesome. So after naps, you really do improve your cognitive function. You are able to restore some of the function to your brain and improve some of the physiology of your body. So I highly recommend napping if it works for you. Not everybody's a napper. And if you're doing it at the right time for the right length.
That is super helpful, because I think it was even just last week. I'm in my 3rd trimester of pregnancy. And so like I get
Mazel tov, congratulations.
Oh, thank you. I get these just like needs to lay down and sleep. And I got one at like, oh gosh, it was probably 4 o'clock. And it was one of those, I woke up from the nap. I think I probably slept like an hour, and I was so groggy. And then that night it was so hard to sleep. I kept waking up. So I think I probably relieved too much sleep pressure. And I think you can usually tell the difference between like waking up from a nap and feeling so groggy or feeling re-energized, because it's not always the same. I totally can relate to that.
Yeah, and it depends how long you nap for and where in your sleep cycle you awake. So if you awake in deep sleep, you're going to feel terrible.
Yeah.
You're going to feel really groggy and miserable. If you awake when you're just at the trail of your REM sleep, you're going to feel great. And sometimes in mornings, we will actually feel like we are still in the dream or we remember the dream, because when you're waking, you're just coming out of REM often in the morning. And that actually is something that allows you to feel much more alert because you're not waking up out of deep sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And that feeling that you have of grogginess is a phenomenon called sleep inertia. So sometimes we wake up from a nap and we feel the feeling of sleep inertia, which is that we feel kind of groggy and miserable for a period of time, because your brain is not fully awakened, but that can clear up quite quickly. So don't feel, I used to be somebody who's like, oh, I can't nap because I have that awful feeling afterwards, which I now know is sleep inertia. But it turns out that if you just ride through that awful feeling afterwards that sticks around for 5 or 10 minutes, you are far more alert and capable afterwards. So don't let that keep you from future napping.
Yeah, the first thing I did to try to wake myself up was go on a walk. That did seem to help. By the time I got back, I was feeling much better. But yeah, at first it was like, oh, this is worse than before. Totally. So I would love it if you could talk a little bit about dreams. Does the Muse sleep help us understand what's happening when we dream? And do you see, I know I've heard a lot of people say we don't actually know exactly what's going on with dreams. Like, what do they mean? What are they comprised of? That sort of thing. But what, from your research and study, have you found relating to dreams and anything important we should know about?
Yeah, so we really don't know why it is that we dream. It is a state when we're in REM sleep where we are able to access a different part of our consciousness than we are when we are in deep sleep. And so you have a lot of the events and experiences that you've had in your life replaying. And one theory of dreaming is that these things replay so that you can build new connections in your brain. You can consolidate your memory. So one of the main things that happens in our sleep is it's kind of like we're going through our filing system. So throughout the day, we've taken in new information, we've seen new things, we've had new smells and feelings and all of that. At night, it's like we open back up those experiences of the day and we reconnect them to what happened before. So it's like you open up the filing system in your brain and you start to build connections between what you had happen today and previously. And that allows you to then store it, encode it, and remember it and have it be part of the fabric of your experience. So there's one kind of encoding that goes on during deep sleep, and there's a second kind of encoding that goes on during REM sleep. So you are opening up the experience of your past and reconnecting it to what you've recently learned. And that can be really weird. It brings up all sorts of images that kind of half make sense because now they're being connected in ways that didn't necessarily connect before. And one of the theories of REM sleep versus deep sleep processing is that in REM sleep, we are re-experiencing the emotions that we had during these experiences. And that's why dreams can often feel very powerful. You can feel scared in your dream. You can feel, uncomfortable. You can feel these sensations sometimes in your dream. And that's because it is refiring the emotional experiences that we had to help us process and store and understand them. So that's why some people say, dreams can give you insights into what's meaningful to you because there is this emotional valence that's attached to it. Anxiety dreams are usually pretty clear signs of things that you're anxious of. I would perpetually have this dream about being in university and missing something and, being scared and getting a bad mark. You can see where my anxiety lay. And then I start to look at like, where does that perfectionism lie in my current life? Why is this dream coming up now? The feeling that I might be missing something or doing something wrong. And dreams can also be impacted through activities like lucid dreaming, where you're actually able to go in and start to intentionally have something happen in your dream. So, dreams really offer a host of opportunity for us to both analyze what's going on in our current life, what's being triggered, what's there in our subconscious that we don't have access to in the same way. And when I say access to our subconscious, I'm not talking about something like weird. It's like our brain processes information in different ways. And this is a part of your brain that's processing information, that's giving you information that you don't necessarily have access to in your daily waking life because it is suppressed.
So then I just want to make sure I caught that the emotional side of processing is happening in REM sleep. What part is happening in the deep sleep then?
So in deep sleep, actually, it's super cool. In deep sleep, you have the connection of what happens in your day to your night. So you have the encoding of encoding of memory, which also happens during REM sleep, two different kinds of encoding. Side note, during deep sleep, some of the encoding that happens is forgetting, which is really cool. So during deep sleep, your brain is choosing what to remember and what to forget. Because there's some things that we want to forget, like if you remembered every single day where you parked, it would be really hard when you came back to your car to remember where your car was because you'd remember all of the locations from previous days. And that would be very confusing. So, our brain chooses what to remember and chooses what to forget during sleep.
Oh my goodness, that's fascinating. I have never heard that before. Really, really fascinating. So from a health perspective, when I think about even the anxiety piece and the emotional processing, do we want to be dreaming? Like, is it a sign of concern or maybe if we're dreaming and we don't remember? Because there are some people, and I used to be for a while, one of them is like, I just never dream. Does that mean I'm not accessing REM sleep? Or does that mean I just am not remembering my dreams? What are your thoughts on that?
Don't worry if you feel like you're not dreaming. Basically, all of us dream, unless you have some crazy REM sleep disorder, which is extremely rare. All of us dream. And, if you wear a Muse throughout the night, you're going to see your REM sleep. It's right there. It's really obvious. And it is you dreaming, but you may not remember it. And some of the ways that we remember our dreams are, one, to be intentional about it. So if you choose, okay, I want to remember my dream, then you're far more likely to do so. And two is to wake up during the dream. So when you wake up during the dream, it becomes much easier to remember what just happened in the dream and to be aware that you were dreaming. So that's why in like a lucid dreaming protocol, you might actually be waking yourself up in the middle of REM sleep, or just in the morning as you're waking up. If you take a moment to try to remember what happened, you'll likely realize, oh, I was waking, dreaming and then waking, and then I can recognize that was my dream state. I can remember what happened in that dream.
What determines whether or not we remember them? I know you mentioned like waking up during is you're more likely to remember, but other than that, is it just, because I know there are some dreams too that stand out because they were so emotionally charged, and maybe that plays a role in it as well. Like being pregnant, I dreamed recently that I lost all my teeth due to like nutritional deficiencies in pregnancy. And it was like a horrifying dream. So I'm going to remember that, but maybe there are others that are just not as consequential. So you're not as likely to remember them. I'm not sure.
Yep, that's well said. So just like in waking life, when things are charged with emotion, we're far more likely to remember it. We're biologically built that way. In dream life, if it's charged with emotion, we're far more likely to remember it. It'll get tagged into our brain. And by the way, dreaming that your teeth have fallen out or that they're loose is an incredibly common dream. It's something that most people have experience with. It just happens to be a pattern of dream. It may be because your tongue is hitting your teeth as you sleep, and so it's causing a little bit of sensation or movement. And so that causes you to think about your teeth and dreaming during dreaming. Nobody's quite sure why this dream comes up, but it's super common.
Whoa, I had no idea. Yep. That makes me feel better. Thank you. And knowing I'm not alone and losing all my teeth in my sleep. So to kind of wrap up our conversation, you've shared so many really insightful things, and I'm just so grateful to get to learn more about sleep and everything fascinating going on in our brains during that time. But I know that for someone who wants to just improve their sleep, after they walk away from this call or this conversation, they want things they can do right away. Do you have like a top 3 or 5 things that could help improve our night's sleep pretty quickly?
Totally. So the first thing to do, as we talked about, is align yourself to your circadian rhythm and the light around you. So that means if you want to choose your bedtime, maybe it's going to be 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, whatever it is that's right for you, choose your bedtime and start to dim the lights around you about 60 minutes before bedtime. Turn off all the excess lights, turn off your screens, get them out of your face. And then that will help you start the production of melatonin, which will allow you to fall asleep faster. The next thing you want to do is make it dark while you sleep. So cover any lights, close doors, close curtains so that it's really dark in your room while you're sleeping. And then after that, when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you want to do when you wake up at the time when you want to be awake is to open your curtains, turn on your light, and turn off your melatonin tap. Because circadian rhythms are something that can be set and actually repeat themselves very nicely day after day, which leads me to number 2, which is be consistent about your sleep. So many of us have willy-nilly sleep schedules. Oh, I'll go to sleep at 10 o'clock here, at midnight there. That makes it really hard to sleep well because circadian rhythms are rhythms. They happen, repeatedly each night. So you want to create a really predictable pattern for your body where it knows, okay, now it's time for melatonin to be turned on because it's 9:30 and it's going to start ramping and it's going to be high at, 10:30 when I go to sleep. And now my body knows it'll make a nice amount of melatonin until 6 a.m. when the light's going to come on, it's going to be bright and it's going to drop. And the more you can be consistent, the better your sleep will be. And my last biggest tip is cut the caffeine after 12 noon. Some of you might be going like, huh? What did she just say? She didn't just say that. Did she really? Yes. So in the same way that we're like, oh, I can sleep 6.5 hours and it's fine. Most people are like, oh, I can have caffeine at 8 p.m. and it's fine. And it isn't. Caffeine is the number one thing that steals your sleep. And as you age, you become more caffeine sensitive. So even if you were able to actually fall asleep at, after a cappuccino at 8 p.m. when you were 20, it's going to be much harder to do that when you're 40 because the ability for our bodies to break down caffeine reduces as we age. So the half-life of caffeine is 6 to 8 hours. That's the amount of time it takes to get half of the caffeine out of our body. And so if you have caffeine at, let's call it noon, by 8 p.m., maybe 3/4 of it is gone. By 10 p.m., much of it is gone, and it's going to be much easier to fall asleep. By the way, why does caffeine steal your sleep? Because it interferes with your sleep pressure. So remember that little molecule I was talking about, adenosine, and how it builds up in your brain and makes you super sleepy? Well, caffeine actually jams adenosine's ability from building up in your brain. So that's why a cup of coffee makes you feel alert because it's blocking your sleep pressure. However, it continues to block your sleep pressure many, many hours later when you want to be asleep. So, one of my biggest tips is please, 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 no caffeine after noon. That alone might significantly improve your sleep. You'll be able to see more deep sleep, faster to sleep, and less frustration. And then the final tip, number 3, is meditation. Anxiety is one of the biggest reasons we don't sleep, keeping our brains rotating at night and thinking about stuff that we don't need to be thinking about as we sleep. So a practice like meditation that teaches you to quiet your mind, quiet your body will very naturally help you to improve your sleep.
I think those are great. And I think it is really important too, to realize even just talking about the naps versus the caffeine and how maybe at noon, instead of coffee, you could have a short 25-minute nap because you're before that 2 o'clock mark for naps. And then that could help you if you need that little boost versus grabbing another cup of caffeine. So I think that's super helpful to be aware of. So if people want to get in touch with you, learn more about Muse, and are interested in this sleep device or the meditation device, where can they go to get connected and see everything you have to offer?
Sure. So you can go to choosemuse.com, CHOOSEMUSE.com, choosemuse.com. And there you can find out about using Muse to meditate and to help you fall asleep, track your sleep, and our feature called the digital sleeping pill, which puts you to sleep at the beginning of the night and helps you fall back asleep without any pills. And it's quite effective. And if you want, we have a discount code POD10, POD10. And if you want to find us on socials, it's at Choose Muse, and you can find me at Ariel's Musings.
Well, thank you for that. It has been really fun to get to talk with you all about sleep and to, just hear from a neuroscientist, the ins and outs of what's going on. I find it so fascinating. The whole area of sleep is just crazy. It's crazy to try to dig into and understand. So thank you.
Thank you. It's a joy and a pleasure. And congratulations on your little one.
Oh, thank you. You as well with your second. So cool.
Thank you.